Hello everyone, as promised, I'm going to record the continuation for our lesson on the topic domain bacteria. So last time we talked about the general features, how they were produced, how they transfer gene from one cell to another, and then the different classification, di ba, based on nutrition, based on morphology, based on gram staining. So for today, we are going to talk about the major groups of classification. So this group is so diverse that it includes all of the types of organisms that you can think of: photoautotrophic, chemoautotrophic, heterotrophs. Some can be anaerobic, while others can be aerobic. No, and it is because with the use of the 16S ribosomal RNA subunit, wherein molecular biologists recognize that there are five uh, subgroups, no, for proteobacteria. Okay, so um, let me just go back. No, meron tayong major and minor, sinabi natin kanina. So yung first major would be proteobacteria, chlamydia, and then spirochete, cyanobacteria, and then gram-positive bacteria. Okay? And then we have the minor bacteroidetes, green sulfur bacteria, green non-sulfur bacteria, and thermatogae. Okay? So it's a very diverse classification, and it's yung ginamit dito is yung 16S ribosomal subunit, no? And this eventually led to the discovery of genomes of thousands of bacteria. And with this genomic information, scientists were able to group bacteria according to their genetic similarities. Okay? So ito yung pag-uusapan natin today. So for proteobacteria, baliktan ko lang, no? These are a clade of gram-negative bacteria. So that is why in the major classification, wala si gram-negative bacteria, si gram-positive separate, because essentially gram-negative bacteria are all situated under proteobacteria. Okay? And meron siyang major sub groups or classes, no? Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. And each of these uh, subgroupings have specific siya na features. So say for example, for subgroup alpha under proteobacteria, many of the species in the subgroup are associated with eukaryotic host and are chiefly or like mostly oligotrophic. So when we say oligotrophic, ibig sabihin, ito yung mga organisms na capable sila mag-survive in or environments with low levels of nutrients, no? And scientists hypothesize that mitochondria evolved from aerobic alpha proteobacteria through endosymbiosis. So in our lesson on protists, malalaman natin endosymbiosis. But as early as now, it's important that we know that the term endosymbiosis means living together, no? Especially living inside, no? Living within, parang ganun. So it's basically a term that tells us about symbiotic relationship wherein one organism lives inside the other and usually mutualistic, no? Hindi nako-compromise yung isang organism. Okay? And then we have subgroup beta naman. Unlike sa subgroup alpha, most proteobacteria under the subgroup are eutrophic, no? Eutrophic, kaya baliktaran siya ng oligotrophic. That means that these organisms require large amounts of organic nutrients to survive. And kailangan masatisfy yung nutritional requirements niya for it to survive. Otherwise, it will not flourish, no? So for example niyan, Nitrosomonas. Nitrosomonas is a very common cyanobacteria. It's actually these organisms play an important role in nitrogen cycling, no? Particularly yung pag-oxidize ng ammonium ions to produce nitrite, no, as a waste product. Kasi nitrate is deleterious. It's actually bad even especially for organisms, no? But if this is uh, converted into nitrite into a form that can be readily used by photosynthetic organisms to make their food. So that is not a threat anymore to living organisms. Okay? And we also have subgroup gamma. This is the largest and most diverse among the 5 classes of proteobacteria. So maraming common dito, no, or like famous na examples. Say for example, Escherichia coli and then Vibrio cholerae, no? Both are causative agents for diarrhea in human. So many of these organisms are actually pathogenic to human. Gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, no? And here in the picture is Thiomargarita namibiensis, no? This is also an example of this one. And then subgroup delta naman would include further 3 major groups. So meron siyang myxobacteria, meron siyang sulfate-producing bacteria, and Dalovibrios. When we say myxobacteria, ito yung bacteria that can form fruiting bodies. Mura na siya grapes at the terminal end. And other books would call these simply slime, no? Itong portion na to. And when subjected to harsh environmental conditions. And what this does, no, these fruiting bodies, say for example, nagkaroon ng drought, okay? These organisms are capable of releasing these resistant na myxospores, wherein when the environment becomes favorable, then it can flourish into into a new organism. Okay? And then we also have sulfate-producing bacteria. Ibig sabihin, these are organisms or bacteria that make use of sulfate in degrading organic compounds. And Delovibrios are bacteria that feed on other bacteria. Okay? We also have the smallest subgroup. Under proteobacteria, we have epsilon, no? An example for this is Helicobacter pylori, and this one is the causative agent for stomach ulcers. So another well-known representative for this group is Campylobacter, which also causes gastrointestinal disorder in human, no? And most are motile, spiral, or curve-shaped and pathogenic to both animals and humans. Okay? So that's for proteobacteria. Yung next naman is also a pathogen considered to pathogen to human. Okay? We have chlamydia. It's a small group of non-motile and cocci-shaped bacteria, and all organisms under this group are intracellular obligate parasites. Intracellular, nasa loob sila, and they are parasitic obligate parasites sila. No? And these parasites can only survive within animal cells, no? And they exhibit a physiological characteristic similar to that of a virus, wherein a host cell is needed to fuel, no, their metabolic processes. So many species of chlamydia are causing human infections, and many of these are like sexually transmitted, di ba? And meron din namang iba na respiratory yung kanilang atake, no? Like chlamydia pneumoniae. Okay? And then we also have spirochete. Spirochete are gram-negative bacteria naman. Ang kanilang distinguishing feature is the wavy or the spiral structure, no, that's within their body. And this is basically flagella that's located inside their body. And specifically, yung flagella ng spirochete, it's found between the inner and the outer membrane known as the periplasm. Okay? And these are also pathogenic, mostly are pathogenic. No, say for example, yung syphilis, which is also a sexually transmitted infection, is caused by these bacteria. Okay? And another example would be yung Leptospira, which of course causes leptospirosis, ano? So these are some of the examples. So after yung ating mga pathogenic bacteria, we also have yung ating bacteria na capable of photosynthesis. So ito yung ating mga cyanobacteria. And because they are capable of photosynthesis, they are widespread in marine and freshwater environments. So more commonly referred to sila as blue-green algae, but they are technically bacteria. No, they are not considered algae despite the common name to them as blue-green algae because they share characteristics with the chloroplast of algae. Okay. However, they are bacteria because their cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. So that is very similar with many bacteria. Unlike that of algae as a protist, yung kanilang cell wall is made up can be made up of cellulose. Okay? So be careful about that one, huh? So cyanobacteria are the only bacteria na group that is capable of photosynthesis, no? And they are primary producers, as I said kanina, in the aquatic ecosystem. So they occupy the bottom part of the food chain. And in agriculture, for example, they cultivate this one as biofertilizer, biocontrol agents, detoxifiers, and even as a source of biofuel, ano? Especially this process would take inside the thylakoid membrane. So this one actually can be harnessed. No, once you break open the cell wall of this cyanobacteria, then you can harness this oil bodies, no, within the bacteria, and then pwede siyang maging possible source of sustainable biofuel. Sustainable in the sense kasi na madali lang i-culture yung cyanobacteria. Okay? And then we also have gram-positive bacteria. So alam natin gram-positive bacteria, yung outermost layer ng kanyang cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan and it's thick, no? And it's less virulent compared to gram-negative, no? So based on the premise na antibiotic yung kadalasang ginagamit, no? Because exposed yung kanyang peptidoglycan layer. Okay? So antibiotic, for example, like penicillin can easily penetrate this layer, no? And defensive enzymes like lysozyme can break it down. And then we also have the minor groupings, no? So for the minor groups, we have bacteroidetes. These are anaerobic gram-negative rod-shaped bacteria, and they usually thrive in the gastrointestinal tract of humans and animals. Okay? Yung kanilang distinguishing characteristic is the presence of a unique cell membrane called the sphingolipid, which is a fatty acid chain attached with the sphingosine backbone. Okay? So ito yun, instead of a glycerol head, no, yung kanilang cell membrane is meron siyang fatty acid chain just like with normal bacteria, pero wala siyang glycerol head, no? Wala siyang glycerol moiety, but instead meron siyang sphingosine. Okay? And although they are found in the gastrointestinal tract of humans, they actually form mutualistic relationship. Okay, so say for example in the intestine, these organisms help the host in breaking down complex na molecules, no, to form in a form that the host can absorb. So in return, the host, or in this case the human, would provide the nutrients for these bacteroidetes to grow. So they are abundant in the human gut, but some species of bacteroidetes are also pathogenic to human, no? Like some of them would cause abdominal sepsis, which is a fatal condition, no, caused by the body's response to infection. And we also have green sulfur bacteria. So from the word itself, no, these are organisms that can perform photosynthesis using sulfide or sulfur as their source, no, of nutrients, no, and they are anaerobic phototrophic organisms. So they are distinguished from other bacteria because of these light trapping organelles. Ito yung chlorosomes, yung naka-yellow dyan sa picture, no? And embedded in this chlorosome are bacteriochlorophyll pigments, which uses light energy for photosynthesis. So very similar siya kay chlorophyll, no? Okay? So, kung merong chlorophyll kay plants, meron namang bacteriochlorophyll for green sulfur bacteria. Okay? For green non-sulfur bacteria naman, similar sa previous natin na example. However, they can perform photosynthesis in anoxic environments or yung wala talagang oxygen na environment, no? And the major difference between the two is that instead of using sulfide as an electron acceptor, non-sulfur bacteria would utilize other organic substrates and sometimes hydrogen as a donor of electrons. So yun lang yung talagang pinagkaiba nila, but both are capable of performing photosynthesis and both can thrive in anaerobic or anoxic environments, no? And then lastly, we have thermotogay. So yung distinguishing characteristic naman ito is the presence of a unique cellular envelope known as toga. Ito yung toga noon on both ends. So this is also viewed under the electron microscope. Okay, mura siyag hat, no? And details about the function of the cell envelope known as toga have yet to be established. Wala pa talaga siyang um, parang clear-cut na function, but it is believed to act both as a cellular barrier and also for anchorage, no? Which would enable the bacteria to utilize insoluble carbon sources. So an example of a well-studied Thermotoga species is this Thermotoga maritima. Okay, its sequence has shown that several of its genes are closely related to archaebacteria, and it could be linked with its capacity to thrive also in very hot environments. Okay? So, bacteria pa rin siya, hindi siya archaebacteria kasi its membrane lipid is still not branched, no? However, it's able to thrive in very hot environment, just like some archaebacteria. Okay? So, as a summary for this lesson, basahin nyo na lang. And I hope this lesson will help you in your